She was brought to the auction in chains, until a stranger raised his hand without a word. The girl couldn't have been more than 16, her dark hair matted with dust and dried blood. But it wasn't her youth that made the crowd of hardened men in Tombstone's market square fall silent. It was the way she stared at them, not with fear, but with the cold calculation of someone who had already counted every face and was simply waiting for the right moment to kill. "What am I bid for this Apache half-breed?" bellowed Silas Greer, the slave trader. "Young, strong, and she's got special talents." The crowd pressed closer. The girl's wrists were bound with iron shackles, but her fingers moved in subtle patterns, testing the metal's weakness. A scar ran from her left temple to her jaw, fresh, deliberate. $20, called out a prospector. $30, shouted another. But then a shadow fell across the platform. The stranger had appeared as if from nowhere, tall and lean, wearing a black duster. His face was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but when he raised his hand, every man in the crowd felt ice crawl up their spine. $500. The silence was deafening. Greer's eyes widened with greed and suspicion. $500? This hay race just I heard you. The stranger's voice was soft as a rattlesnake's warning. $500. Gold. He stepped forward, and the crowd parted. Up close, you could see the matched Colts at his hips, the arsenal beneath his coat. But it was his eyes that made grown men step back, pale blue, like winter sky, and utterly without mercy. The girl on the platform had gone completely still, watching him with the intensity of a hawk. For just a moment, their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or shared purpose. Greer counted the gold coins, with shaking hands. "She's all yours, mister. But I got to warn you, this one's got a mean streak. Already killed 2 of my boys." The stranger said nothing. He produced a key that fit the shackles perfectly. The iron fell away, and she rubbed the raw skin with fingers more accustomed to knives than kindness. "Come on," he said quietly. "We're leaving." They rode out of Tombstone in silence. At the edge of town, the stranger's black stallion waited, a horse bred for war. "Can you ride?" he asked. She nodded once, swinging up behind him with fluid grace. As they rode into the desert, she finally spoke, her voice carrying an accent that might have been Apache. "You're not here to save me." It wasn't a question. The stranger's shoulders tensed. "No," he admitted. "I'm here because of what you know." "About the silver?" "About who's been moving it, and where it's going." They rode hard through the desert. The girl, she called herself Raven, though he suspected it wasn't her real name, proved to be more than skilled. She could read invisible tracks, smell water from miles away, and kill with her bare hands. He discovered this when they were ambushed at Devil's Canyon. 6 men with rifles came out of the rocks like spiders. The stranger had drawn his guns before the first shot was fired, but Raven was already moving. She hit the ground rolling, came up with a knife from nowhere, and opened the nearest gunman's throat before he knew she was there. The fight was over in seconds. 4 men dead, 2 wounded. The stranger holstered his guns and studied Raven with new respect. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "Same place I learned about the silver." She cleaned her knife on a dead man's shirt, "From the man who's been hunting you for 3 years." The stranger went very still. "Colonel Morrison. He's not a colonel anymore. Lost his commission when the army found out about his side business. Now he's just another outlaw with a grudge and too much silver to move." They searched the dead men's pockets, finding what the stranger had expected: silver coins, freshly minted, with markings that didn't match any legitimate mint. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Raven held one up to the light. "Too bad it's going to get a lot of people." As they rode deeper into the wasteland, Raven told him the story. 3 years ago, Morrison had discovered a played-out mine that wasn't quite played out. Instead of filing a claim, had kept it secret, using army resources to extract the silver and his own network to move it east. "But silver's heavy," the stranger observed. "How did he hide it?" "By melting it down and recasting it as religious artifacts. Crosses, candlesticks, communion cups. Who's going to search a shipment bound for churches?" The stranger felt a chill. "How many shipments?" 12 so far, each one worth enough to buy a small army. Raven's voice was flat. "Which is exactly what Morrison's planning to do." That night, camped in Apache ruins, the stranger finally asked the question eating at him. "Why are you helping me? You could have escaped from Greer any time." Raven stared into the fire, her scarred face unreadable. "Because Morrison killed my family. Not in battle. He had them murdered because they stumbled onto his operation. My father, my mother, my little brother. Shot them down like dogs. And you survived. I was hunting rabbits. By the time I got back, they were already dead. Morrison's men took me to sell, but not before they gave me this." She touched her scar. "So I do remember who owned me." The stranger studied her across the fire. "What's your real name?" "Maria Santos. My father was Mexican, my mother was Apache. I never thought of myself as a half-breed. I was just me. I'm sorry about your family. Sorry doesn't bring them back. But killing Morrison might help me sleep at night." The next morning brought unwelcome news. Riders on the horizon, at least a dozen men, all armed. "Morrison's found us," Maria said, checking her weapons. "He's been tracking us since Tombstone." "How?" "Because I let him. I wanted him to follow. I wanted him to think he was hunting you." The stranger stared at her. "This was a trap. From the beginning. For him, not for you. Morrison's arrogant. He'll bring his best fighters and leave the rest to guard the silver. When he comes for us, we take him down." She led him to a hidden canyon where the walls rose like cathedral sides. At the far end was a narrow passage. "Dynamite," she explained. "Enough to bring down half the canyon wall. Morrison's men will come through single file, and when they do, you're going to bury them alive. Some of them. Morrison will be at the back, too careful to lead from the front. But when his men start dying, he'll have to come forward. And that's when we take him. That's when I take him." The attack came at noon. Morrison's men rode into the canyon whooping and firing. The stranger and Maria waited until the last rider entered. Then Maria triggered the dynamite. The explosion was deafening. Half of Morrison's men vanished instantly, buried under tons of stone. The survivors found themselves trapped with nowhere to run. The stranger picked off 3 men with his rifle. Maria moved like a ghost through the rocks, her knife finding targets with surgical precision. But their real prize was still out there. "Morrison." Mariah's voice echoed off the canyon walls. "Come out and face me." The answer came as a rifle shot that splintered rock inches from her head. Morrison had taken cover behind a boulder, using his remaining men as a screen. "You think you're clever, girl?" he called out. "You think this changes anything? I've got 50 men scattered across the territory, and enough silver to buy 100 more. I'm counting on it," Maria replied, circling behind his position. "Angry men make mistakes." The stranger kept Morrison's men pinned while Maria worked through the rocks. Gunfire, shouts, the sound of steel meeting flesh. Then suddenly silence. When the dust settled, Maria was standing over Morrison's body, her knife red with blood. 8 bodies lay scattered around the canyon floor. "Is it over?" the stranger asked. Maria wiped her knife clean. "This part is. But you're right about his men. They'll come looking, and when they don't find him, they'll get desperate. So what do? We find the silver before they do. And we make sure it never reaches the people Morrison was planning to sell it to." The hidden mine was 2 days' ride through unmapped country. Morrison had chosen well, a narrow valley surrounded by peaks, accessible only through a passage so narrow 2 men couldn't ride abreast. But when they reached the mine, they found it empty. "He moved it," Maria said, studying the abandoned equipment. "But where?" The stranger examined tracks around the entrance. "North. Recently. Maybe a week ago. That puts them in Redemption." The name sent a chill down the stranger's spine. Redemption was a town in the gray area between law and lawlessness, where questions weren't asked and money talked louder than justice. They rode hard through the night. By dawn, they could see Redemption's church steeple rising from the desert. The town was crawling with armed men, all moving with military precision. Morrison's private army had taken over. There, Maria pointed to a building on the edge of town. "That's where they're keeping the silver." They waited until nightfall, then made their move. The guards were good, but they weren't expecting an attack from someone who moved like smoke and killed like lightning. What they found inside made them both stop and stare. The silver wasn't coins or bars. It was weapons. Rifles, pistols, ammunition, all crafted with master precision. Enough weapons to arm a small army. Morrison wasn't planning to sell the silver, the stranger realized. He was planning to use it to buy himself a war. Against who? Against everyone. The government, the army, anyone who stood in his way. Maria picked up one of the rifles. These are military grade. Better than military grade. Someone's been selling weapons to Morrison. We need to destroy this. All of it. Agreed. But first, we need to find out who's been supplying Morrison. The answer came in a ledger hidden in Morrison's desk. Names, dates, quantities, all written in careful script. And at the bottom of each page, a signature that made the stranger's blood run cold. General Harrison, he whispered. Morrison's former commanding officer. The one who court-martialed him. The same. Looks like Morrison had something on his old boss. Maria studied the ledger. According to this, the next shipment is due tomorrow night. Harrison himself is coming. Then we'll be waiting for him. They spent the night rigging the warehouse with explosives. When the building went up, it would take Morrison's entire weapons cache with it. But first, they needed to deal with Harrison. The general arrived at midnight in a convoy of military wagons. He was tall with graying hair and the bearing of a man accustomed to command. Morrison, he called out, entering the warehouse. Where are you, you worthless? He stopped when he saw the stranger and Maria waiting, weapons drawn. General Harrison, the stranger said quietly. You're under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and murder. Harrison's hand moved toward his sidearm, then stopped when he saw Mariah's eyes. You're an outlaw. You're vigilantes. We're justice, Maria replied. The kind you forgot when you started dealing with men like Morrison. Morrison's dead, isn't he? Very dead, the stranger confirmed. But his operation was bigger than just him. We want names, General. All of them. Harrison's face went pale. I can't, you can't. Mariah's voice was soft, dangerous. Do you know what Morrison's men did to my family? She stepped closer, and Harrison backed away. You supplied the weapons that killed innocent people. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Harrison whispered. Morrison had evidence of irregularities in my command. He was blackmailing me. There's always a choice, the stranger said. You chose money over duty. Now you choose between cooperation and joining Morrison in hell. Harrison gave them everything, names, locations, financial records, the entire network supplying weapons to outlaws across the territory. When he finished, he looked like he'd aged 20 years. What happens to me now? Start walking, the stranger said. And don't stop until you're out of the territory. If we see you again, we'll kill you. Harrison stumbled out, leaving his weapons and dignity behind. The stranger and Maria turned to the weapons cache. Time to light the fuse, Maria said. The explosion could be seen for 50 miles, a pillar of fire rising into the night sky. Morrison's weapons, Harrison's corruption, and the dreams of a dozen criminals went up in smoke. As they rode from the burning warehouse, Maria asked the question that had been haunting her. Who are you really? Bounty hunters don't carry $500 in gold like pocket change. The stranger was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out a worn leather badge. In the firelight, Maria could see the eagle and stars of A.U.S. Marshal. Marshal Thomas Kane, he said quietly. I've been tracking Morrison's operation for 2 years. Maria stared at the badge. You're federal law. You could have arrested Harrison. Harrison was small fish. The real prize is the man coordinating this from Washington. Someone with access to military supplies, government contracts, and enough political protection to operate with impunity. Who? Senator Charles Whitmore, chairman of the Senate Military Affairs Committee. He's been using his position to funnel weapons to criminals across the West, then using the resulting chaos to justify increased military spending. Mariah's face went dark. Morrison was working for a senator? Morrison thought he was working for himself. The senator's been playing both sides, arming the criminals, then positioning himself as the man who can stop them. My family died to make a politician more powerful. Your family died because they stumbled onto something bigger than they could have imagined. And now we're going to make sure their deaths weren't in vain. 3 days later, Maria woke to find Kane gone. His horse was still there, his gear remained, but the man had vanished. She found him 20 yards from camp, tied to a cottonwood tree with his own rope. His face was bloody, his clothes torn, and standing beside him was a figure from her nightmares. "Hello, little sister," said the man who had haunted her dreams for 3 years. "Did you miss me?" Diego Santos, her brother, supposedly dead, stepped into the firelight. He was older now, harder, with scars matching the one on her face. "You're dead," Maria whispered. "I buried you myself. You buried someone else. Morrison's men took me the same day they took you. But unlike you, I learned to appreciate the opportunities they offered." Mariah's hand moved toward her knife, but Diego was faster. His gun was trained on Kane's head. "I wouldn't. The marshal's been very helpful in leading me to you. Did you know he's carrying a bounty notice? $5,000 for Maria Santos, wanted for the murder of 12 federal officers. That's impossible. How many men have you killed since Morrison found you? How many might have been working undercover for the government?" Maria felt the ground shifting. "You're lying. Ask the marshal. Ask him why he really came to Tombstone." Kane's eyes met hers, and she saw the truth. "The auction was a setup," he said quietly. "We'd been tracking you for months. Greer was working for us. You're federal law. You can't work with slave traders. We can work with anyone if it serves the greater good." Morrison's network was more important than one girl's freedom. Diego pulled out photographs, each showing a man shed killed. Beneath each photo was a federal badge and service record. Agent Martinez, 10 years with the Marshal Service. Agent Rodriguez, 8 years undercover. Agent Thompson, 6 years tracking arms dealers. Maria sank to her knees. "I didn't know. Morrison's men were shooting at us." "You thought you were the hero," Diego said. "But heroes don't exist in the real world. There are only people trying to survive, and people trying to profit from survival. So what happens now? Now you choose. Come with me willingly, stand trial, maybe get life instead of the noose. Or run and spend your life being hunted. There's a third option," Kane said quietly. Both Maria and Diego turned to him. "You can help us finish what we started. Morrison's dead, but his network is still operating. Help us stop Senator Whitmore, and maybe we can make this right." "You're in no position to negotiate," Diego said. "You're a wanted man yourself, Marshal. Did you think we didn't know about your little side business? The bribes you've been taking?" Kane's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about. 5,000 from a mining company to look the other way. 10,000 from a railroad company to suppress evidence. Should I go on?" "Who are you really?" Maria asked Diego. "I'm your brother. I'm also Agent Diego Santos, Treasury Department. I've been tracking government corruption for 5 years, and both of you are part of the problem. Someone's been stealing silver from government mines, weapons from military arsenals, money from federal accounts. Morrison was just the tip of the iceberg." "Senator Whitmore," Maria said. Diego shook his head. "That's what we wanted you to think. Whitmore's clean. He's been helping us. The real criminal is someone with access to the highest levels of government." "Then who?" "Judge Patricia Hawthorne. The woman signing warrants for your arrest, authorizing seizure of criminal assets that mysteriously disappear. She's been using her position to legalize theft on a massive scale." Diego pulled out a map marked with red pins. "Every town where Morrison's men operated, every place where criminals were arrested and their property seized. She's been systematically taking control of the most valuable land in the territory. To what end? Statehood. When this territory becomes a state, she'll be positioned to become its first governor, and she'll control enough resources to make herself one of the most powerful people in the country." Kane struggled against his bonds. "You're talking about a conspiracy requiring hundreds of people. It only requires a few people in key positions. A judge who can legalize theft, a general who can provide weapons, a network of criminals who can do the dirty work, and a federal marshal who can make sure the right people get arrested. I'm not part of this," Kane protested. "Aren't you? Who told you to come to Tombstone? Who gave you information about Morrison's operation? Who authorized you to work with slave traders?" Kane's face went white. "Judge Hawthorne. She briefed me on the mission, and she's been using you to clean up loose ends. Every criminal you've arrested, every case you've closed, How many were actually guilty? How many were just inconvenient witnesses? Maria watched realization dawn on Kane's face. Morrison never killed my family, she said quietly. He was just the executioner. The real murderer was Judge Hawthorne. Your family stumbled onto a silver mine that Judge Hawthorne had already claimed through legal manipulation. They had to die to protect her secret. She's been playing us all. From the beginning. She wanted Morrison dead because he was getting too independent. She wanted you captured because you were too dangerous. And she wanted me to bring you both to her, so she could tie up loose ends. Diego smiled, for the first time. The smile she remembered from childhood. I'm tired of being anyone's pawn. Time to play our own game. He cut Kane's bonds. We give Judge Hawthorne exactly what she wants. We bring her Maria Santos, the notorious outlaw, Marshal Kane, the corrupt lawman, and Agent Santos, the undercover operative. And then we spring the trap. But first, we need evidence. And for that, we need to break into the courthouse. The courthouse in Pueblo Verde was a fortress of stone and steel, built to withstand Apache raids. Getting in would be difficult. Getting out alive would be nearly impossible. 12 guards during the day, 6 at night, Maria said, studying the building. They change shifts at midnight and 6 a.m. The judge's office is on the 3rd floor. The vault is basement level, Diego added. That's where they keep the evidence and records too sensitive for public files. The vault has a time lock, Kane noted. It won't open until morning, and only if the judge is present to turn her key. Then we'll be there when she opens it, Maria said. They spent 2 days preparing. Diego procured official arrest warrants, legitimate ones, signed by a federal magistrate in Denver. Kane gathered evidence from his own cases, and Maria planned violence. The attack came at dawn. Maria and Diego entered through a tunnel connecting to the old Spanish fort. Kane came through the front door, his marshal's badge getting him past the checkpoint. They met in the vault, where Judge Hawthorne was opening the time lock. "Good morning, Your Honor," Kane said, his gun trained on her back. Judge Patricia Hawthorne looked like someone's grandmother, not a criminal mastermind. But when she turned around, her eyes were cold as winter. "Marshal Kane, I was wondering when you'd finally figure it out. You're under arrest for conspiracy, theft, and accessory to murder." "Am I? And who's going to process that arrest? The sheriff taking my money? The prosecutor who owes his job to me?" "We are," Maria said, stepping from the shadows. "All of us. Miss Santos, you're not quite what I expected. I'm exactly what you made me. I made you. My dear, you made yourself. I simply provided opportunities. You murdered my family. I authorized the seizure of illegally occupied land. If your family chose to resist, that was their decision. They were sleeping. They were trespassing on property that legally belonged to the territorial government. My job is to enforce the law, not question it." Diego stepped forward, his badge gleaming. "Agent Diego Santos, Treasury Department. You're under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy, and treason." Judge Hawthorne laughed. "Treason? You have no idea what you're dealing with. This operation has approval from the highest levels of government." "From whom?" "From Senator Whitmore, who's been cooperating with our investigation. From General Harrison, who's fleeing the territory. From people who understand that sometimes the law must be flexible in service of a greater good. The only thing you've been serving is your own ambition." Judge Hawthorne's eyes flicked to something behind him. "Perhaps. But I'm not the only one." That was when Maria heard the footsteps. Heavy boots, moving with military precision. Too many boots. "You led us into a trap," she said to Diego. "No," he replied grimly. "We led ourselves into one." The soldiers who entered wore no insignia. They were led by a man in a colonel's uniform who looked familiar, too familiar. "Morrison," Kane breathed. "Colonel Morrison," the man corrected. "I told you I wasn't dead, but I never said I wasn't resourceful." Mariah's hand moved toward her knife, but stopped when she saw rifles trained on her. "You died in that canyon. I killed you myself. You killed my brother, James. I'm Colonel William Morrison, and I've been watching this operation from the beginning. The pieces fell into place. You've been playing all of us. Every single one." Judge Hawthorne thought she was building a criminal empire, but she was actually building a military occupation. Agent Santos thought he was investigating corruption, but he was actually mapping the territory's defenses. To what end? To end this charade called territorial government. Washington doesn't care about a few square miles of desert. The best way to control a territory is to make sure it never becomes a state, to keep it weak, divided, dependent on federal intervention. You're talking about permanent military occupation. I'm talking about permanent military government. No more territorial legislators, no more local judges, no more civilian law enforcement, just military efficiency. The people will never accept that. They'll beg for it. When the Apache raids increase, when the outlaw gangs multiply, when corruption becomes so widespread that no one trusts anyone, they'll welcome military rule. Maria felt sick. You've been orchestrating all of it. All of it. My brother James was one piece on the board. Judge Hawthorne was another. You were all pieces in a game you didn't know you were playing. Why destroy an entire territory? Because this territory sits on more silver than the rest of the country combined. Because it controls trade routes to California. Whoever controls this land controls the future of the American West. You're talking about overthrowing the federal government. I'm talking about replacing ineffective civilian government with efficient military government. President Grant won't live forever, and when he dies, this country will need strong leadership. Morrison nodded to his soldiers. Kill them all except the girl. She's going to help us send a message. But Morrison had made one crucial mistake. Had assumed Maria Santos was still the broken girl sold at auction. Had forgotten she was the ghost of the desert, the woman who'd killed his brother and a dozen other men. The knife left her hand before anyone could react, burying itself in the nearest soldier's throat. Diego rolled right, gun blazing. Cane dove left, his weapons clearing leather with the speed of a man who'd survived too many gunfights. The vault erupted in gunfire and screams. Maria moved like liquid death, her hands finding weapons everywhere, knives, guns, even a brass candlestick that crushed a soldier's skull. When the smoke cleared, Morrison's soldiers were dead. Morrison himself was wounded, clutching his shoulder and backing toward the entrance. Judge Hawthorne was pressed against the wall, white with terror. "It's over," Maria said, her voice deadly calm. "No," Morrison gasped. "It's just beginning. You think I'm the only one. There are others who share my vision. Kill me, and they'll find someone else. Then we'll kill them too. All of them. There are dozens of us. Hundreds. We're embedded in every level of government, every branch of the military. We're the future of this country." Maria picked up her knife, wiping it clean. "Maybe, but you won't be alive to see it." She drove the blade between his ribs, angling toward his heart. Morrison's eyes widened, then went blank. He fell forward, his blood spreading across the stone floor. "What about her?" Diego asked, nodding toward Judge Hawthorne. "She stands trial. A real trial, with real evidence and real justice. And if she's convicted, then she hangs. Like any other murderer." Judge Patricia Hawthorne was tried in Denver, far from the territory where Shed wielded power. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, correspondence, witness testimony from dozens of victims. She was convicted on all charges and sentenced to death. But on the night before her execution, she was found dead in her cell, apparently having taken poison. Her last words were, "The colonel was right. There are others." The investigation into territorial corruption continued for months, uncovering a network of graft and violence reaching the highest levels of government. Dozens of officials were arrested, tried, and convicted. The territory's entire legal system was reorganized under federal oversight. And somewhere in the vast emptiness of the American frontier, 3 people who'd been pawns in someone else's game tried to figure out what came next. Maria Santos disappeared into the desert, just as Shed always planned. But the stories that spread around campfires told a different tale. They said she was still out there, still hunting the corrupt and cruel. They called her the ghost of the desert, death incarnate riding the wind. And whenever a crooked politician disappeared, whenever a corrupt lawman was found dead with a knife wound, people whispered her name. Marshal Thomas Kane resigned his commission and became a private investigator, using his skills to help victims of the corruption he had unknowingly served. He never spoke of what happened in that vault, but those who knew him said had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. Agent Diego Santos was promoted to chief investigator for the Treasury Department's new anti-corruption division. He spent his days hunting down the remnants of Morrison's network. He never found his sister again, but he never stopped looking. The territory eventually became a state, built on justice rather than corruption, law rather than violence. The silver mines were nationalized, the stolen land returned to rightful owners, and the dead were finally given proper burials. And in the cemetery in Pueblo Verde, 3 new graves appeared one night, marked with simple wooden crosses. The names carved into the wood were those of the Santos family. Local legends said they'd been placed there by a woman in black. A woman had come to pay her respects and finally lay her ghosts to rest. But by morning, the woman was gone, vanished into the desert like smoke on the wind. The only proof she had ever existed was the fresh earth on the graves and the single white rose left on her brother's marker. The auction in Tombstone was forgotten by most, just another sordid chapter in the territory's violent history. But for those who knew the truth, it marked the beginning of something that would reshape the entire region. The rise of a legend whispered around campfires for generations. They said she was Apache. Others claimed she was Mexican. But everyone agreed on one thing. She was justice itself, riding the wind in search of those who preyed on the innocent. The stranger had raised his hand without a word, but in doing so, he had unleashed something far more dangerous than he could have imagined. Not a rescued victim, but an angel of death with a mission that would never end. The silver was gone, the weapons destroyed, the corruption exposed. But the legend was just beginning. And somewhere in the vast emptiness of the American frontier, Maria Santos continued her hunt, carrying justice in her holster and vengeance in her heart, a force of nature that would never rest until every corrupt official had paid for their crimes. She was brought to the auction in chains, they said, but the chains had been an illusion from the beginning. Maria Santos had never been anyone's property, never been anyone's victim. She was the ghost of the desert, death incarnate, and God help anyone who stood in her way. The legend would live forever, passed down from father to son, from campfire to campfire, a reminder that justice might be delayed, but it would never be denied. And in the end, that was all that mattered, not the silver, not the corruption, not the schemes of powerful men, just justice, pure, simple, and inevitable as the desert wind.